My name is Jasmine Taylor. I'm 36 years old, the founder and CEO of Luminina Systems, a tech company specializing in supply chain solutions, headquartered in Denver, Colorado. After 12 years of building from scratch, surviving 2 near bankruptcies and 3 grueling funding rounds, my company finally secured the biggest contract in our history, a $24 million deal with Crestview Holdings, a major commercial real estate developer in the western United States. I still remember exactly how it felt when Eleanor Price, CEO of Crestview, picked up the phone and confirmed that they had chosen Luminina Systems over a competitor 3 times our size. It felt like finally breathing after years of suffocation, like being seen after so long of being dismissed as the girl with a few lines of code and a dream. I thought this time my family would be proud, this time I would be recognized as someone of real worth. I was wrong. My younger brother Brandon Taylor's wedding was held at the bride's private estate in Carmel, California. Although things between Brandon and me had grown cold over the years, I agreed to attend. Not because I was overly optimistic, but because I believed maybe it could be a new beginning. A chance to reconnect, a moment to return to being family. As my mother always said, as long as you know your place. The problem began when I found out a small detail that Brandon, and my entire family, had conveniently forgotten to mention. His bride, Claire Hastings, was the daughter of Nathan Hastings, CEO of Crestview Holdings. In other words, the company that had just signed the largest contract in my business's history was my future in-laws' company. Not a single person in my family told me, not one word, not even "Oh, Jasmine, by the way, Brandon's father-in-law to be is Nathan Hastings, the man negotiating with your company." They stayed silent, as if my success was something to be hidden. I knew this wasn't accidental. Brandon knew who I was. He knew Luminina Systems. I had mentioned it 100 times. He knew why I quit my job in Seattle, why I spent nearly a year sleeping on a couch in my office to save on rent. But Brandon never really listened. My mother, Susan, only wrote me 3 lines in the wedding email. "Brandon's wedding will be a big event. Hope you can come. Dress modestly. Claire is pretty traditional." No congratulations. No questions about my work. Not a word about the deal her daughter had just secured. I used to think I was used to being overlooked. But this crossed a line. Because when the Lumina Crestview deal was announced internally, I immediately called my parents. I was excited to share. I hoped, genuinely, that this time they'd be proud. I still remember exactly what my mother said, her voice cool and dismissive. "Oh, really? Brandon's marrying Claire Hastings. She's Nathan's daughter. Your contract, that's your thing? The big family event right now is the wedding?" I went quiet. I don't know what made me still show up to that wedding in the custom blue dress I had tailored in New York, hoping, foolishly, that this time I would be seen. Not as a shadow, but as myself. I used to be very close to Brandon. We were 3 years apart, growing up in a gray wood house in Boulder, Colorado, where winters blanketed the porch in snow and summers smelled of fresh pine from the forest out back. We built forts from old blankets, split the last pack of cookies in the pantry, and once hid a neighbor's cat in the basement when my mom warned, "Don't bring that filthy animal in here." Brandon was the first person I taught basic coding to, from a library book I borrowed. He was the only one who clapped when I won the 6th grade science fair, but everything changed when we hit our teens. Brandon joined the high school football team in 9th grade, while I spent weekends tinkering in robotics club and attending free online coding courses. Suddenly, I wasn't funny Jasmine anymore. I was just that weird girl in the Taylor family. "She's always glued to that computer," my mom would say to neighbors, smiling with her mouth but frowning with her eyes. "Hopefully she'll get outside a little more." Meanwhile, every time Brandon kicked a long ball or scored, it was like we'd made national TV. My dad, Walter, hung a photo of Brandon in his football uniform right in the middle of the living room wall, where the only family portrait that included me used to be. When I won the state-level coding championship, my dad was busy driving Brandon to a summer training camp. when I earned a full-ride scholarship to Carnegie Mellon after waking up at 2 a.m. to interview across time zones. My mom only asked, "Have you considered a state college, closer to home, less expensive?" They never asked what I wanted, they just knew I wasn't Brandon. I wasn't social, I wasn't athletic, I didn't fit into real-world environments. That last one came from my dad. I remember it perfectly. It was my 21st birthday. I called to share that I had landed a summer internship in Seattle, my dream company. He was silent for a moment, then offered this. Advice? Jasmine, having a degree is one thing, but real life needs real experience. Not all that online theory stuff. You should learn from Brandon. He understands the real world. Brandon's version of the real world? After graduating high school, with just enough to pass, he got an internship at our maternal uncle's construction firm, then was promoted to project supervisor within 6 months. He had never managed a team or pitched a contract, but he wore a white button-up, sat in an office, and my mom called him our model of stability. Meanwhile, I took on student loans to pursue a double major in computer science and data analytics. I waited tables at night, stayed up until 3 a.m. to finish project work, then rode the bus 17 miles to a research center every morning. No one in my family ever asked if I was tired. They only sent pictures of Brandon at his community college graduation with the caption, "We're so proud of our son." When I graduated summa cum laude and was invited to stay on as a research fellow, my mom texted, "Congrats, but have you thought about settling down? You're still a girl." And I endured. I kept calling on holidays. I still sent gifts for my parents' birthdays, even when they forgot mine 3 years in a row. I still hoped, foolishly, that one day they'd see that I wasn't invisible. But being left off Brandon's wedding invitation, not even being mentioned despite holding the biggest contract from the bride's family business, that made me realize I was never truly part of this family. I started Lumina Systems on a February night in a run-down studio apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Denver's Five Points neighborhood. Outside the window, street lamps cast a pale yellow glow over the snow, while in my hand I had nothing but an old laptop, $18,200 in savings, and a small business loan I secured after 3 rounds of interviews with the bank. I placed my desk right beside the kitchenette, pressed against the wall, across from the sofa bed I bought off Craigslist for $100. For the first year I had no office, no employees, just me, a whiteboard hanging loosely from a coat hanger, and the dream of an AI-powered smart supply chain platform I called Orion. Nobody believed in Orion, and certainly nobody believed in me. The first time I called home, my mom's voice rang out like always, sweet at the start, sharp by the end. "Aren't you working a stable job yet?" she asked. "How long are you going to chase this computer thing?" I told her I was trying to build a tech platform for mid-sized logistics and transport companies, a market segment neglected by the big players. She paused for a few seconds, then laughed. "Oh, honey, sounds like you're doing something unusual." Anyway, Brandon just got promoted to team lead at Hastings Building Supply. Looks like he'll make director soon. You should learn to have a plan, like your brother. No one in the family asked if I needed anything. They didn't ask if I could afford rent, if I was eating well, or if I needed someone to review my first legal contract. When I hinted that if my parents wanted to invest, I was open just $5,000 in exchange for equity, my mom sighed. "We don't have money to throw into vague ideas, Jasmine. You need to be more realistic. At your age." At my age, I was only 28. By the 12th month, I could barely keep up with debt payments. Orringham had no clients. I knocked on every bank's door, pitched at every chamber of commerce, attended tech fairs in old warehouses on the edge of town, just for the chance to speak to one investor, one potential buyer, anyone willing to listen past 2 minutes. Then, one March morning, I got an email from an unfamiliar name, Lisa Patel, COO of Mid-Range Foods, a mid-sized frozen food retailer based in Salt Lake City. She had attended a virtual webinar I hosted. one with just 4 attendees. Lisa was one of them. The email had just 3 lines. I was impressed with the model you described. My company's facing serious warehouse and transport data issues. Can we talk next Tuesday? I called Lisa 3 days later after preparing everything down to the last detail. The pitch lasted 18 minutes. Negotiations stretched out over 3 weeks. Mid-range became my first client, a software installation package worth $64,000. I cried silently when the invoice was paid. Just 6 months later, Orion was mentioned in an article by Supply Chain Today as a lightweight solution with the potential to boost efficiency by 18% in 3 quarters. From there, it felt like the floodgates opened. A produce shipping firm in Texas reached out, then a domestic goods distributor in Nevada. I hired my first employee, Sophia, a systems engineer formerly at Amazon, and secured my first real office on the 8th floor of a modest building near downtown Denver. I called my mom, voice trembling slightly. "Oh, Mom, I just signed a new contract. If things go well, Lumina's revenue might hit $1 million this year." She paused, then said, "Brandon just bought a new car, that GMC Terrain. It really suits him." I hung up. But this time, I didn't cry. The contract with Crestview Holdings came like a sudden downpour in the desert. It was a 3-year deployment package worth $24 million, the largest deal to date for Luminina Systems. The negotiation took nearly 4 months, beginning at a logistics business conference in Houston, where I gave a short presentation on optimizing interstate transport data. Eleanor Price, COO of Crestview, approached me after that session. She was brief and razor sharp. "I've sat through dozens of hollow pitches. You're the first one who hit exactly where we're bleeding. You have 2 weeks to show me what Orion can actually do." My team and I worked those 2 weeks like our lives depended on it. We built a full prototype for their Albuquerque branch, simulated the entire system for 7 days, and demonstrated a projected savings of at least 14% in operational costs within the first quarter. The result? The contract was signed, and I was invited to the Strategic Partnership Announcement event at Crestview's headquarters in San Diego. I arrived as a CEO. No cocktail dress, no sparkling necklace, just a charcoal gray suit, pointed leather shoes, and the confidence built over 12 years of proving people wrong. And that's where I met him, Nathan Hastings. Nathan arrived 10 minutes late, but the room fell silent as he entered. His silver hair was neatly combed like a luxury watch ad, his bespoke suit fit flawlessly over a broad frame, and his eyes were sharp, like nothing slipped past him. "Jasmine Taylor," he said immediately, no introduction needed. "You're the reason my entire engineering team skipped lunch for 3 weeks. I like that." I shook his hand, returning a professional smile. "Thank you for trusting our solution, Mr. Hastings. Orion's still evolving, but I believe it'll take Crestview even further." "Call me Nathan," he said, then lowered his voice slightly. "And you should know, Eleanor spoke a lot about your capabilities. What she didn't mention is that you're Brandon Taylor's sister." My heart skipped half a beat. "Excuse me, sir?" "Brandon Taylor," he repeated, "fiancé of my daughter, Claire. They're getting married next month." "And you're his sister?" "Same last name, both from Boulder, both went to Woodpine High." I steadied myself. "Yes, we're siblings. But I had no involvement in their relationship throughout this deal." Nathan squinted, not angry, just deeply observant. "You think I care about that? No. I'm just surprised that someone as critical as you was never mentioned. Brandon never once said, 'His sister is the CEO of the company we're about to partner with in our largest deal of the year.'" I pressed my lips together. In that moment, every cold phone call, every subject change from my mother, every unanswered message from Brandon lined up like dominoes. My invisibility wasn't accidental. It had been engineered. "Maybe. My brother didn't think it was necessary," I said softly. Nathan gave a slight smile, gaze fixed on me. "That's a shame, because I think if anyone deserves a seat at the head table at that wedding, it's not some high school buddies, but the woman who just helped me save nearly $4 million during the pilot phase. I said nothing more, but something shifted inside me. Not pride, not quite anger, a realization. I had built something so real, so undeniable, that even those who tried to erase me couldn't ignore me anymore. Only now, if Nathan Hastings was the first to recognize my presence, the bigger question remained. Why did my own brother, about to marry into Nathan's family, go out of his way to bury it? And more importantly, how long did they think I would stay silent? The wedding was held at the Hastings private estate in Carmel, a Spanish-style mansion spanning over 30 acres, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The driveway stretched nearly a mile, lined with neatly trimmed olive trees and blue stone. I arrived with my boyfriend, Daniel Kwan, a finance director at an investment fund in Seattle, whom I met during a spring business conference. I had spent nearly 2 weeks preparing for that day, choosing an outfit, rehearsing a speech. I'd been informed I would give a brief toast during the honorary reception, and most of all, preparing myself emotionally. Despite past slights, I hadn't expected them to erase me completely from my own brother's wedding. The moment we checked in at the reception desk, I sensed something was off. The young woman in a black dress scrolled through her tablet and paused when she saw my name. Jasmine Taylor, +1, please wait here a moment, I'll get the manager. I raised an eyebrow but nodded. Daniel looked at me with a quiet, "Is something wrong?" in his eyes. I whispered, "Probably just a small mix-up." 5 minutes later, a middle-aged woman, Angela, the event manager, arrived, speaking in a low, rushed tone. "We're so sorry, Ms. Taylor. There's been a last-minute update to the seating chart, but we've arranged a private area for you and your guest. Please follow me." I kept my composure, but as Angela led us away from the main garden, where over 30 tables were adorned with white lace, purple orchids, and chandeliers hanging like floating stars, I started to understand. She opened a door leading behind the kitchen. Inside was a small space, once a staff dressing room, now temporarily decorated with a round table and 2 folding chairs covered in white fabric. On the table were 2 half-warm glasses of champagne. "This is my seat?" I asked, my voice frozen. "We truly apologize for the inconvenience," Angela replied, avoiding my gaze. "Mrs. Clare, the bride, requested to prioritize seats for business guests from New York and Silicon Valley. We had to make a few adjustments." Daniel leaned toward me, his voice low but firm. "They're treating you like an afterthought." Before I could respond, a familiar voice came from behind. "What's going on here?" I turned. Claire, wearing a crystal-embellished mermaid gown, her makeup flawless like a bridal magazine cover, stood, holding a glass of champagne, lips curled in a half-smile. "Oh, Jasmine, I heard there was a little hiccup. Such a shame. There wasn't room for everyone at the main table. But I'm sure you understand. My father's guests are a key part of this year's strategy. Hope you don't mind." I took a deep breath. "Claire, I'm the groom's sister and CEO of the company providing a software solution worth over $20 million to your family." She smiled, raising her glass. "Exactly why I figured you'd be gracious enough not to make a scene. After all, you're used to being in the background, aren't you?" Daniel gently squeezed my hand. But I no longer needed anyone to hold me back. I had lived in silence long enough. I'd endured every "you should understand" every time I was overlooked. But this crossed the line. "Does Brandon know about this?" I asked, each word sharp. Claire shrugged. "My mother's approved the chart this morning. I doubt there were any surprises." My heart plummeted. My own brother, the one I'd taught how to use Excel, the one I called for 3 months straight during his unemployment, he had signed off on this. I no longer felt angry, just hollow enough to feel the silence echo. "Daniel, can you give me a few minutes?" I asked, my hand still cold. He nodded, his eyes fixed on Claire like he was committing her face to memory. I stood alone in the auxiliary storage behind the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of grilled salmon, the clatter of silverware, and the hushed voices of kitchen staff pretending not to see me. My face burned, not with rage, but shame. A deep, quiet kind of shame, as if no matter how hard I worked, I'd never be worthy of being present at a wedding where I was the groom's sister. I pulled out my phone. My hand still trembled, but my mind had never been clearer. The first call was to Alan Hayes, Lumina's senior legal counsel. Jasmine? His voice held a hint of surprise. Alan, prepare the termination documents for Crestview Holdings, effective immediately. I'll sign the hard copy Monday morning. Sorry, what? Is there a problem with the rollout? No. The problem is ethics and basic respect. I hung up. No further explanation. Straightening my blazer and wiping away the smudged mascara beneath my eyes, I stepped out of the kitchen and back into the garden. Daniel waited at the edge of the lawn, his eyes asking, "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I walked straight toward the head table, where Nathan Hastings laughed with three men in slate gray suits, wine in hand. Brandon sat beside him, his face slightly tense. Claire was chatting with someone from media, unaware I was approaching. I stopped beside the table. "Nathan," I said calmly, yet coldly, "I need a minute." He turned, clearly surprised to see me. Gaspering, "What's going on?" I met his eyes. "I just contacted Lumina's legal team to terminate our contract with Crestview, effective immediately." The music continued, but around the head table, silence dropped like a curtain. Brandon looked up, pale. "What did you say?" Nathan's voice dipped low. "This isn't about Orion, or software, or KPIs, or cost efficiency. It's about how you treat partners, especially when you think they're just the groom's sister. I was seated in the kitchen, wasn't I? With your daughter's and my brother's consent." Claire started to speak, but I raised a hand. "Don't, Claire. I have the receipts. Emails from the event team, the approved seating chart from this morning. You confirmed it yourself in front of at least 3 people. I don't need your explanation." I turned to Nathan. "I can't allow Lumina to continue with a company that can't distinguish between family ties and professional respect. If you think I'm the kind of woman who can be shoved aside at a wedding and still send monthly software updates without question, you're mistaken." Brendan stood. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a seat. Do you have to ruin my wedding?" I looked at my brother, the one I stayed up nights helping with job applications, the one I paid summer tuition for out of pocket. "No, Brandon, this isn't about the seat. It's about 15 years of being treated like a shadow in my own family. And you stood by nodding, clapping, letting it happen." I looked around the table. At least 4 CEOs and investment executives watched the whole thing unfold. If any of you think I'm an impulsive woman tearing up contracts over a bruised ego, I'm fine with you walking away. But if you've ever been treated like your worth was invisible and still stood up to build something real, maybe you understand. 1 second, 2, 3. The first to nod was Greg Lambert, development director at Rixer Group, who'd ghosted 3 of my demo pitches in the past. "I think," he said, "we need a meeting with Lumina as soon as possible." Then 2 business cards slipped into my hand. No one objected. Claire's face flushed. Nathan said nothing. He just exhaled and murmured, "You surprised me, Jasmine, but maybe I needed to be surprised." I nodded. And I needed to be seen. Not as someone's sister. As myself. As I turned away, Daniel came beside me, squeezing my hand. "You just did something they'll never forget." "I don't need them to forget. I just need them to remember the right person." We left the party under stunned eyes and whispers behind our backs. As Daniel's car turned out of the Hastings estate, I sank into the seat, kicked off my heels, and let out a long breath, like I'd just come out of a psychological surgery without anesthesia. My phone buzzed endlessly in my purse, but I didn't look. I knew exactly who was calling. The first message popped up as we exited the freeway. "Call me back now. You ruined everything, Brandon." Then one from my mother. "You're shaming the entire family. Do you even know what Scott had to do to secure that opportunity?" I quietly locked the screen and dropped the phone back into my bag. Daniel glanced over. "Want to talk about it?" No, not right now. I just want some silence. Okay, he said gently, hands on the wheel. But when you're ready, I'm here. The next morning, I woke to a flood of emails, texts, and 4 missed calls from my father. Walter, the same man who never interfered in women's business, unless Brandon's reputation was on the line. By late morning, I got the call I couldn't avoid, my mother, Susan. I picked up not to hear her blame, but because I needed to face the wound. I hope you know how disappointed I am, she opened, no small talk. That was your brother's wedding, the biggest day of his life, and you turned it into some kind of unnecessary power play. Mom? I cut in, voice steady. Have you ever once asked yourself why I ended up in the kitchen at my own brother's wedding? It was just a seat, Jasmine. I let out a short laugh. To you, it's just a seat. To me, it's a lifetime of being put in the back. And Brandon knew. He stood by. And you've always thought he deserved more. No matter what. Don't blame the family just because you feel slighted. Brandon is on the verge of something big, and if Richard Hastings pulls out of the deal because of this, that's the problem, isn't it, Mom? I gripped the phone tighter. It's always about money, positions, who benefits. Never about right or wrong. She went quiet for a few seconds, then hung up. No goodbye. 2 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. Jasmine, it's Lucille. Your dad's sister? I blinked. Aunt Lucille? The woman we were forbidden to mention growing up because she was rebellious and disrespectful to the family? The one I'd only heard about in disjointed childhood whispers? Another message followed. Saw your post on LinkedIn about Crestview. I'm proud of you, and I understand if you'd like to meet, I'd love to grab coffee this week. I said yes. 3 days later, I sat across from a woman in her 60s at a small cafe in Pasadena. Salt and pepper hair neatly pinned, crisp white blouse and gray slacks, polished like a retired CEO. When I refused to sign over the construction business to your father and uncles, they called me selfish, Lucille said, voice calm, not bitter. But if I hadn't walked away and built something on my own, I'd never have known what self-respect truly feels like. I looked at her and slowly nodded. So, this didn't start with me. No. She smiles. It's a cycle. Every generation they pick one daughter to dismiss, and if she's lucky, one day someone decides enough is enough. Lucille was the first person in this family, if I could still call it that, who truly saw me without Brandon's shadow hanging over me. Daniel, meanwhile, stayed beside me, quiet, steady. He didn't ask about the wedding or mention Crestview. He just made dinner when I was tired, took me on walks when my head felt heavy. And in that small, steady peace, I realized I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't need instant understanding. I just needed to protect the boundaries I'd finally drawn, whether the one crossing them shared my blood or just my inbox. Because in the end, when I stood up in that crowd clapping for Brandon, I wasn't demanding justice. I was declaring I had never belonged in the back. 2 weeks after Brandon's wedding, the Luminina Systems office buzzed like a disturbed hive. Just as the strategy meeting ended, my executive assistant, Sarah, came in, eyes bright and holding her iPad. Jasmine, Greg from Halberd Ventures just confirmed the next round meeting. They're offering $10 million. Global Grid and Involve Capital also requested private demo slots. I nodded and jotted it down. The post-wedding exhaustion had ebbed like a retreating tide, replaced by a sharper energy, clear, decisive, unapologetic. Good. Tell them we'll present our European expansion plan, especially Germany and the Netherlands. We don't chase anyone. If they want in, they play by our terms. Ending the Crestview deal had seemed like a blow to the company, but instead it cracked open new possibilities. No longer bound to one big name, we could reallocate resources, implement advanced Orion features previously stalled by Crestview's technical constraints. Unexpectedly, how I handled that split caught the attention of several investors. especially those looking for firms with principle-led cultures, not ones that bow for short-term gain. The next month, I was featured in Fortech Weekly's Women to Watch. My portrait, not in a cocktail dress, but my favorite charcoal gray suit, appeared on the secondary cover. The headline read, "The CEO who walked away from $24 million and got double back." Daniel printed it, framed it, and hung it outside my home office. He didn't say much, just left it there like a quiet reminder. You don't need anyone else to validate your worth, except you. Amid that shift, I launched a project I'd long dreamed of, a mentorship initiative for women in tech startups called Visible. The name wasn't random. It was my answer to how I'd been treated most of my life. Invisible. Visible didn't just provide technical and strategic support. It hosted deep dive coaching sessions on boundary setting, navigating investor manipulation, and, most importantly, reclaiming personal value in an ecosystem that so often defines women by who they're connected to, not what they've built. The first launch event was held in a modest convention center in Boulder. Attendees came from Seattle, Austin, New York, Missoula, and when I stepped on stage, I opened with, "I'm Jasmine Taylor. I'm Brandon's sister." But that's not why I'm standing here today. The room went still, then erupted in nearly a full minute of applause. My family? They didn't change overnight, but cracks had begun to show. My father, Walter, sent a short email. "Read the Fortech interview. Maybe I underestimated your decisions. Hope we can talk soon." My mother didn't call, but she texted 3 words. "Congratulations, Jasmine." I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd learned that real respect doesn't come from blood. It comes from how you enforce your boundaries with those who assume they can cross them. As for Brandon, he stayed silent. Word was he was struggling to patch things up with Richard Hastings after the contract fallout. Claire had vanished from Crestview's PR photos. Rumors said they were living separately for now. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't feel guilty either. I just felt calm. Because for the first time, I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. And that, not a headline, not a new deal, was the greatest victory of my life. A victory born from one simple choice: to stop seeking validation and start living by the worth I already had. Late Saturday afternoon, I sat on the balcony of my 14th floor apartment, Denver's skyline glowing gold under the sunset. Daniel was in the kitchen, clinking utensils, probably cooking something with salmon and asparagus. The soft scent of melted butter drifted in the breeze. I curled up in my chair with a cup of hot tea, gazing toward the Rockies as they slowly faded into a gentle orange hue. My phone lay idle beside me, still no text from Mom, no missed calls from Brandon, no apology, no explanation. And strangely, I wasn't waiting anymore. I used to believe my worth depended on being acknowledged by family, that no matter how much the world praised me, if my mother didn't call to say, "I'm proud of you," I still hadn't made it. But after everything, I've realized one truth more clearly than ever. Family ties are no excuse to accept being hurt. And recognition, if begged for, loses all value. I no longer want to convince anyone I'm worthy. I don't need a seat begrudgingly handed to me at someone else's table. I can build my own. A sturdy, fair table for those who listen, those who respect. And strangely, once I did that, many came to sit with me. Not because I pleased them, but because I stayed true to myself. Daniel stepped onto the balcony, set a plate in front of me, then took the seat across. "Lemon butter salmon, nothing fancy. But you need fuel. This week you've been running a marathon." I laughed. I needed something warm. And someone who doesn't talk much, but always shows up. "Thank you." "For you, always." He smiled, reaching across the table to hold my hand. A small gesture, yet it spoke volumes. When someone truly sees you, they don't need a reminder. They show up. I spent years believing I had to be something. good enough, quiet enough, giving enough to be accepted. But the truth is, I've always been enough, even when others refused to see it. I thought of Ms. Lucille, the woman once labeled difficult for keeping her own company. Now, every Friday morning, we have coffee at the corner of 14th and Pearl, chatting about business, books, and the things no one dares mention at family dinners. I thought of the women in the Visible program, once called delusional, impulsive, unrealistic, now reclaiming language and space to define themselves. In every session, I see myself in them, skeptical eyes, hesitant voices, and gradually, through each story shared, through being truly heard, the light in them grows clearer. I also thought of my mother. Maybe she'll never change. Maybe she'll always see me as stubborn and difficult. But that no longer suffocates me, because I know I'm not here to be the reflection of anyone's expectations. I'm here to fulfill the fullest version of who I am. An email pinged from Sarah. A Swiss investor wants to negotiate bringing Orion to Europe. I smiled, typing a short reply. Schedule the meeting, but be clear, terms will never be about money. They're about respect. I looked at Daniel, then out at the city transforming under the violet sky. Every journey worth taking begins with one decision, not to follow the worn path, but to step off it, even if you must walk it alone. My story doesn't end with a reunion, a teary hug, or a dramatic apology. It ends with a quiet but powerful choice. I'm no longer stepping back, and if anyone ever asks me what changed everything, I'll answer simply, it was the day I refused to sit in the kitchen of a party I deserved to be at the center of. Jasmine's story is a powerful reminder. Your worth doesn't come from family approval or anyone else's validation. It comes from how you see and stand up for yourself. In real life, many are pushed aside for not fitting into family expectations. But like Jasmine, you have every right to walk away from a table where you're disrespected and build your own, where respect is not begged for, but given because you've earned it from the start. What do you think of Jasmine's decision? Would you do the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.